Look at this gorgeous lens. The performance of this lens is absolutely astounding. Nothing like this has ever existed. This lens, compared to your 24-70 f2.8, oh, it's a big boy for sure, but the results are worth it. The difference between this and your 24-70 f2.8 are about the same as the difference from APS-C to full frame. Yeah, if you went through that upgrade, choosing this Sigma 28-45 f1.8 would give you the same performance boost, the same boost in low light noise, the same boost in background blur and subject separation. I'm going to tell you all about this incredible lens that I am definitely buying for Sony E-mount and L-mount, because it's really a game changer. The results produced by this create more of a difference than any of these new cameras that have been coming out. I'll show you real sample pictures, critical analysis for how it compares to Sony GM lenses, but first I want to thank our sponsor, Adorama. We shop at Adorama because they have the most stuff in stock. They have the best customer support. They can answer questions, but also I'm just practical. I like to save money. When I shop at Adorama, I get VIP points, and I can spend those VIP points to buy more gear, right? Why would you not take free money? Start at our link to visit Adorama, and then let them know you heard about it through us, and that helps us spend our time creating objective, unbiased reviews so you know what gear to get and what gear not to get. Thanks for sponsoring us, Adorama. Before we get to the side-by-side comparisons, let me show you why this lens is so important. It's written right there on the aperture ring, f1.8. But it's not a prime, it's a zoom. And it's not micro four thirds or APS-C. This is for full frame cameras. It's an f1.8 zoom for full frame cameras. Compared to the standard f2.8 zoom, it's a stop and a third faster. That means it's gathering well over 2 times more light than this. That means it produces more background blur, better low light performance, better than the very top end lens that you can buy for every system. This is astounding. It is beyond professional, and yet the price is not that bad at $1,350. It is significantly cheaper than this Sony 24-70 f2.8. Also note the 82mm filter size is exactly the same as the Sony G Master zooms, so you won't have to buy new filters. There is one lens which is kind of like this, and that is the Canon 28-70 f2. We loved that lens, but even after 5 years, the price has dropped some, but it's still twice as much as this. And also, the difference between f2 and f1.8 doesn't sound like that much, but remember, it's logarithmic, so that 0.2 is about a third of a stop, which means this is faster. And yeah, this doesn't zoom out all the way to 70. It's a 28-45 zoom, but it's lighter, cheaper, and faster. And if you're a Sony or L-mount shooter, well, you couldn't put that Canon lens on your camera anyway, but this we can actually use. So what would you use this lens for? Well, it's not really general purpose or travel photography. For those things, I would want more of a zoom range. For those things, 24-70 is the bare minimum. 24-105 is probably a little better, but we did a review on super zooms. And those super zooms, like, 24-300, that versatility is actually really valuable for general photography, travel situations where you don't necessarily know what to expect. This is almost like a prime in its very limited zoom range. And that means you should use it in situations where you kind of know what you're going to get. I think this is the ultimate lens for event wedding photographers. Situations where you're going to be working close up with people, but it's often at night, often under artificial lights, where the extra aperture of f1.8 over f2.8 is going to give you significantly cleaner images. It's going to allow you to better freeze the action. The extra background blur that you'll get will provide more background separation and make your pictures look better. This will make you a better event and wedding photographer for sure. I also think this is a fantastic lens for videographers. This is the full frame version of Sigma's famous lens, the 18-35 f1.8 zoom. That lens was designed for APS-C sensors, but for 5 or 6 years of our YouTube career, we used a speed booster and put that on Micro Four Thirds cameras. We lived and died by that lens. It was stellar, and it was smaller than this, it was lighter than this, and in full frame equivalent terms, it was about a stop slower than this. But the extra versatility of even that limited zoom range was so valuable for video, where you don't really have as much latitude for cropping, where you kind of want to zoom and get the perfect composition in camera as much as possible. But this is especially valuable for video because so many of us are using video cameras now that support in-camera cropping. Like Sony, Nikon, Canon cameras, often they can support 4K video with a 1.5 times crop without losing any resolution. And if you do that with this, well, that 1.5 times crop brings us out to about 70 millimeters f2.8, which means at the long end for videographers, now you have about the same reach as you would with your 24-70 f2.8. And while it's natural to compare it to zooms because it is a zoom, you might also consider comparing it to one of my favorite lenses, which we film most of our videos on, the Sony 35mm f1.4 G Master. Oh yeah, the prime is significantly smaller and way, way, way lighter. Rather than thinking about this as a zoom lens, sometimes I think about it as a 35 f1.8 prime, where I have the ability to pull back or push in a little bit to more perfectly control the size of the background, the relationship between the foreground and the background subject. And just that little bit of extra zoom control beyond just a prime lens is really powerful. In the few weeks that I've been shooting with it, I really, really like it. But let's not underestimate the size and weight of this thing. It is big and heavy. And walking around with it in New York City with it on my Sony A1, on a strap around my neck, I felt it. I felt it way more than I did the 24-70 f2.8. And that's another reason I don't recommend this as a general lens. Like, you feel this lens. Even if it's stashed in your bag, you're going to feel it on your back. This is a purposeful lens that you will bring to places where it is best suited. But when you do bring it, you will create images that you can't create with any other lens, where you would need multiple prime lenses on multiple different bodies, and those would actually cost more than just this one lens. And sometimes you'd end up missing the shot. Even if you had multiple bodies, you'd have to switch the bodies. But here, switching between a 28 f1.8 prime, a 35, a 45 f1.8 prime, is just a twist of the wrist, not changing lenses. Speaking of that, the handling on this has been excellent. You can see, of course, it's got an aperture ring, which is one of my favorite features on a lens. That means I can dial in the aperture before I even pick up my camera. That means I can quickly make the setting with my left hand while my right hand is pressing the shutter. It has programmable buttons that work with your Sony or L-mount cameras. It has a focus switch, and you can declick the aperture for you video people. Oh, and this is really important. Watch as I zoom. The length of the lens does not change. For focus, neither. It is fixed size. It does not push in and out when you focus or zoom. And that means it's not sucking any air in or out. Even Sony's mighty 24-70 f2.8, the workhorse of so many Sony professionals like myself, this sucks air in. And that means dust eventually is going to get in. This should be more weatherproof than the Sony. Now, as I mentioned, I think this is an amazing lens for video, but I think most of us are going to be using it on a tripod locked off because I tried it on my gimbal. That's where I really wanted to use it. When I'm walking and talking with Chelsea, we'll usually use a 35 f1.4 prime, but having that extra zoom would be nice. But the problem is it's too big. Even with the lens hood off, I couldn't get my DJI RS3 to balance it very well. It would work for a bit, but inevitably as I was walking, it would give me the yellow or red sign, and I know that it just can't handle the weight of this really big lens. So there are gimbals that could certainly handle it. Maybe the RS Pro could handle it. You could get a bigger rig. But for most of us using lightweight gimbals, I think it's going to be too much lens. So how's the autofocus for this lens? I gotta say, it's very good. I do not hear the autofocus motors working. It seems to snap into focus quickly. But generally, for the type of photography I was doing, it missed focus more than I would expect from the Sony lenses. I always got a shot because I'm in the habit of taking multiple shots just for safety. But I think the focusing on the Sigmas isn't quite as precise as you might get with the Sonys. Another limitation of all third-party lenses is that the frames per second on sports bodies like the Sony A1 and the Sony A9 Mark III, they're always limited to 15 frames per second. So if you want to maximize your frames per second on those specific high-end bodies, you might be better off using a Sony lens. Let's get to the side-by-side comparisons, starting with the sharpness. The sharpness on this versus the Sony 24-70 f2.8 was amazing. It was shocking because it was sharper. I didn't expect them to beat the G Master sharpness because this G Master here is our benchmark. It's our standard. It's like the sharpest zoom we've ever tested. But the Sigma was sharper. Let's take a look at the results. How's the sharpness of the new Sigma zoom against our standard, the 24-70 f2.8 GM from Sony? Wow. For center sharpness, the Sigma is noticeably sharper, and it seems contrastier too. The Sigma wins in the center, but how's the corner sharpness? Way out here at the edge, the Sony is better. But for most people, center sharpness is key, so I'm calling this a win for the Sigma. At 45 millimeters, the results are the same. The Sigma is definitely sharper in the center, but sharpness drops off significantly as we approach the edges. But primes are optimized for sharpness. They're simpler because they don't zoom, so generally they have fewer elements and we should expect it to do better, right? Not entirely. Whoa, I don't even believe this. Like, look how much better it is. It's not just sharper, but there's less chromatic aberration. The blacks are black instead of a little bit magenta. And as we move out to the edges, again, the Sigma is better than the Prime. And the Prime is shut down to f1.8. This lens is amazing. I brought the lenses outside to see how they handled shooting directly into the sun, which is common for events where you might be shooting at sunrise or sunset, but it's also really popular for landscape photographers. We love taking pictures of the sunrise and sunset. So let's look first at the Starburst. For this, I raised the f-stop to the maximum. I shut the lenses down to their highest f-stops, f22 on Sony's 24-70 and f16 on Sigma's 28-45, to look at how the Starburst looks. You can see because the Sony shuts down further to f22, the Starburst is a little crisper. The Sigma's isn't quite as contrasty. However, they both have the same number of Starburst points, which is 22, because both lenses have 11 aperture blades. For flaring here, we can see it's significantly worse on the Sony. The Sigma actually seems to have better contrast. Looking at the Starburst from the Sony 35 f1.4 Prime against the new zoom, the Prime actually seems to be a little bit crisper with a little bit less flaring. Here you can see some blobs from the Sigma that the Sony doesn't reflect. The simpler design of Prime lenses lend themselves to less flaring, so that's a win for the Sony Prime. I also opened these up and shot into the sun from a variety of different angles to check the flaring. So let's look at the results. Shooting directly into the sun, wide open, the 24-70 f2.8 does show a couple of spots reflecting off the internal elements, while the Sigma is very clean. One little spot over here, but the Sigma is the winner for the flare. But if we look at the 35mm Sony Prime, it has basically no flare shooting at f1.8. Thus, the Prime is better still. Okay, one final test, which is maximum magnification. That's how close you can get to a subject, but really how big the subject is in the frame. It's great for things like the ring shot at a wedding where you need to really focus on something small. This pretty much tied the Sony 35mm Prime, but it lost by a pretty big margin to the Sony 24-70 f2.8. So for close-up work, this Sony GM zoom lens is still the winner, but the maximum magnification on this was still pretty good. I want to sum this up, but first I want to thank our sponsor, Adorama. Once again, anytime you're shopping for gear, start at this link here. And when you use that link, it lets Adorama know that you support unbiased reviews, not sponsored by the camera or lens manufacturer, because we have never accepted a sponsorship from a camera or lens manufacturer, because that lets us remain unbiased while connecting you to an amazing place to get your gear, the place that has the fastest shipping, the most things in stock, the best customer support, and VIP points that you can spend on future purchases, so it actually saves you money. Adorama is a place made of creators. They really understand us. They're helpful, good people who just want to make your life as a creator go a little bit smoother. So please, again, start at our link, sdp.io/Adorama, whenever you're shopping for any kind of camera, lens, lighting, backpack, tripods, anything you can get from Adorama, please do. Thanks for sponsoring us, Adorama. So should you buy the Sigma 28-45 f1.8 lens? I mean, this is gonna sound crazy after I've been raving about it, but most people probably shouldn't buy this lens. Like, this is a highly specialized lens. This is something that I see perfect for low light events where you're shooting people from fairly close range. But there's not a lot else. It's not a general photography lens. It's not really a portrait lens. It's also great for video. If you're shooting in this focal range, you could be using a prime. If you're locked off on a tripod, the weight's not going to be a problem, and it's going to give you extra flexibility that will improve your compositions compared to what a prime will do. This goes on sale June 20th, so I'm going to pre-order it right away from Adorama, because I want to get my hands on it as soon as possible, because I think this is the lens I'm going to be using all the time. I mean, not just when I'm hired to shoot an event, but if it's my friend's birthday party, I will bring it and I will get the best possible results. Something that really cannot be replicated with a smartphone, because lenses like this put even more distance between proper cameras and the little pocket smartphones that everybody is using for imaging nowadays. And it's a great way to differentiate your work, to set yourself apart as a professional. And it's a lot to carry around. But fortunately, Sigma made it pretty affordable, really beautiful, and super functional. This takes your camera to the next level. So if that sounds like something you need, then I would definitely recommend this lens. Thanks for loaning this to me, Sigma. No, I don't get to keep it. I got to send it back and buy one with my own money. Don't forget to subscribe for more unbiased reviews, lots of tutorials, and breaking news. Bye.